In a world where you're trying to live in perfection, it is a world devoid of things like forgiveness, of growth, of asking questions like, I don't know how I would. You're just not open because you're in this tight command and control environment. So how do you stop it?
Is hold yourself to a standard that is real and achievable and in reach. So instead of saying, I want to leap this foot, leap this inch, and say, if I am making progress towards something, I can give up on perfection. If I'm seeing incrementally that I'm growing, if I'm seeing that I move the needle in a little bit, if I'm seeing this metric go up, if I'm seeing evidence in my life that things are getting better, even if it's small, I'm gonna latch onto that small and go, see, there it is. It's progress. It's not perfection.
Welcome to Scare Confident. I'm your host, Tiffany Souter. Today's conversation is another one in our monthly ongoing series with Brian Kavicky. If you were to stop and ask me about some of the most influential people in my life, those who have truly changed the trajectory of my business, my life, and my understanding of how the world works, there is no doubt Brian would be on that list. So who is Brian? Well, his title is VP Sales Management Consultant at Lucian, which is really not that helpful. His clients say things like, Brian and the team at Lucian have been an invaluable resource as we scaled our sales team. Or, Brian has helped our organization in ways I couldn't have imagined and has become a vital part of our team, and I look forward to working with him for years to come. As I have scaled my own businesses, my mindset, and my abilities, Brian has been a front seat partner to me in my own growth. So, if you are struggling to grow your business, your profits, your people, or your business is growing, but you feel like you're kind of getting trampled in the process, Brian is a voice you have got to tune into. Okay, so enough with the backdrop. Let's get to the conversation. So I'm pumped for today's episode. We're going to talk about two different topics. They're related, we think, could be, but these really came from listener questions. When I asked my audience what's hard in life right now, one of the things that I got back a couple different times is the idea of I'm battling perfectionism. I get this. As an achiever, wanting to do all the things, demand excellence is one of my personal values. It's good in concept, but it can be a trap. So Brian, help us. When somebody says what's hard in my life right now, and they say battling perfectionism, where do we go with this?
The first thing is to realize that that is a self-imposed standard, that nobody said you have to be perfect. Nobody's asked you to be perfect. You've decided that perfect is the only standard to hold yourself to, and therefore everything comes after that. So you're holding yourself to a standard that nobody else is. Nobody. And on top of that, nobody wants you to be perfect. If you look at leadership, one of the key ingredients to building trust with your team is vulnerability, which is admitting you don't have all the answers. So what happens is you put on this perfectionism armor. You say, I have to have this on. Everything has to be perfect. I have to be perfect. And then you're carrying the weight of that armor with you everywhere you go. And it's impacting others because you're holding them to some standard. So for you, if you say, well, I have a value of excellence, excellence is okay. Excellence is we're meeting the expectations that we've set and agreed to. Perfectionism means we cannot find a flaw. And so as long as you're not getting stuck in being flawless, you're probably okay, and that can be productive.
Mm-hmm. So where does this come from? And specifically, my audience is predominantly women. So why does perfectionism show up in your line of work with people? And where does this come from? If nobody's expecting this of us other than ourselves, where does it sprout? How does it start to take control?
I think part of it is it's natural to us in human beings to say we're out to please, but then we add things on top of that. My parents needed me to be perfect. They needed me to be a good student. They demanded it. Well, that was for them, not for you, because your performance was what they were basing their identity on, and they asked you to do that. It wasn't always in your best interest. So it could come from your parents. It could come from your environment. Maybe you're playing the comparison game and you're saying, hey, my friends, my peers, everybody around me is doing better than I am. I have to do better. So you set the standard that this is what I'm supposed to do. And what you haven't done is you haven't looked at why those people are doing what they do to know if it's healthy or unhealthy to make those decisions for yourself. It could be from your spouse, and the spouse is saying, this is what I need you to be, but they're telling you what they need, and you're interpreting it that as I have to be perfect, not what they actually said that they needed from you.
I feel like early in my career, this started because I was like, I knew I was less qualified than other people on the street. That's at least how I interpreted it because I was so young. I didn't have a marketing degree. I hadn't worked in an agency. And so I felt like if I was more prepared, like just more, whatever the thing was, that was how I was going to win. And I remember you telling me that I had to start going into meetings unprepared. Was that a tool to help get this unstuck, or is that not a related?
So perfectionism is arrogance in disguise. If I'm somebody that says, I need to make a perfect plan before I execute the plan, your assumption is that you have a plan in you that is going to be perfect. And that is very arrogant. So in the context of going into a meeting where you're selling or meeting with clients, and you're going in going, I have to prepare and I have to get ready for everything that's going to occur. You're basically saying I'm a mind reader. I know the future and I'm going to prepare for that instead of going in and being present and being human in that conversation and not rolling with assumptions or trying to make your plan happen. So it's actually an arrogance killer to have you go in unprepared because you'll show up with humility and curiosity.
But I can see myself, and I wish this person who'd written this could sit here in this conversation with you to say, like, in my healthy self, I can hear you say that's super arrogant for you to say that have a perfect plan in you. But if I'm in a place where my mind is stuck in perfectionism, it's like, well, how dare you? What do you mean I'm arrogant? Here's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to provide for my family. I'm trying to be my best self. I'm trying to get as far as fast as I can. I'm trying to get a promotion because that's important for XYZ. I'm trying to be present for my kids in the way that I want to. Like, how dare you say that's arrogant? It's not serving me to be perfect. It's in service of the people around me. At least that's what my brain might tell me.
Yeah, but what's interesting is how you phrase that. So you phrased every single thing as I'm trying, which means you know you're not. And it comes from a place of insecurity. If I know I'm not and I'm trying, then I don't think it's in me to do those things. And so you're masking your insecurity by putting on the armor of I'm going to be perfect, when in your heart you know you're not and you can't be, and that not everything is perfect. And you're not just admitting, I'm not perfect. I don't have all the answers. I'm doing the best I can, but that's all I got, and I got to run with that. And that's very freeing to admit that you're doing the best you can with the skills, the abilities, and the experience that you have, and roll with that as opposed to pretending that you're someone that you're not and holding yourself to a standard you cannot possibly achieve.
Because then it creates this like mental failure cycle that starts to screw with your confidence. Yeah?
Yeah, because if you're striving towards perfectionism, you're always living in the gap of I'm not good enough, I'm not any of those things, and you're feeding your insecurity of, see, I'm right about myself, and you didn't want to admit it.
So how do you stop it?
Is hold yourself to a standard that is real and achievable and in reach. So instead of saying, I want to leap this foot, leap this inch, and say, if I am making progress towards something, I can give up on perfection. If I'm seeing incrementally that I'm growing, if I'm seeing that I move the needle in a little bit, if I'm seeing this metric go up, if I'm seeing evidence in my life that things are getting better, even if it's small, I'm going to latch onto that small and go, see, there it is. It's progress. It's not perfection.
I feel like in this world of perfection, because I'm like re-experiencing this in my body as you're talking, in a world where you're trying to live in perfection, it is a world devoid of things like forgiveness, of growth, of asking questions like, I don't know how I would. Like you're just not open because you're in this tight command and control environment. And I remember I would never use the word perfection. That word is not like a way that I think about myself. But as I look back in my own journey, it's like it was this just desire to control things. And when you helped me understand, like, look, you might screw up. You might totally not know the answer. So then you're going to have to go tell the client you don't know the answer. And then they're going to have a choice to make. They're going to ask you, well, you think you can figure it out? Or they're going to ask you, do you think we should go find somebody else who can? And I was like, yeah, I guess that won't be so bad. But it was like, literally, I imagined them just like firing me in my face and like not being able to handle that rejection. And then being like, well, then I got to fill that revenue. Like it just would become this like crazy cycle.
Part of our survival instinct is our brain goes to worst case scenario as default. So whenever we're faced with something difficult, our first thing is we're going to die. Like if it's like, I'm going to jump off this cliff and you're seeing 20, 30 people do it in front of you and you'll go, but if I do it, I'll die. Well, yeah, that's worst case scenario, or I'll be injured horribly. And so you don't do it because you're like, despite the evidence in front of me, I'm going to go to worst case scenario. So you have to uncover like that's not a big deal. So in your example of you're thinking worst case scenario, the client's going to fire you, or they could have a nice conversation and you could get a result. That is also a possibility, but we ignore the possibility when we're in that zone of perfection.
So when somebody comes to you, they might not be able to say yet to them, I'm stuck in perfection. But what does it look like when you're like, this is where you are?
So you'll know if you're in perfection when you're demanding things out of yourself that you aren't working on getting better. So how it will look is that you're holding yourself to a standard, but you're not doing anything to learn how to achieve the standard at all. You're just in this cycle of, I just got to keep trying. You're not asking the question like, can somebody help me get to this standard? So that's one indicator. The other is that people around you are frustrated because they feel like they can't do anything right, because short of perfection is everything else. So they're going to get feedback that they're not correct, that they didn't do enough, that they didn't have enough, that they're missing. So you're lacking positive feedback for people. You're in that cycle of perfection, or you're beating yourself up because all you can see is what's wrong in that same way instead of what's right.
I remember you teaching me this 80% rule. Is that related to this?
Yes.
Can you share that?
So as a rule, 80% done or good enough is enough to be effective. The last 20% has a diminishing return. In other words, it almost doesn't matter. So if you look at the 80-20 rule, you've heard the 80-20 rule as you're spending 80% of your time worrying about 20% of the things. You're spending 80% of your time of clients aren't even good clients. But the reality of that is that when we're going for perfection, is we're trying so hard to make something better or work that has no hope to do that. And it's just a frustration maker and time waster.
Well, it was a big theme as I was trying to scale the organization and like hand things off. I was like, but I can do it better.
And you could.
And then you would say that to me. Yes,
Yeah.
you can.
Yeah.
And I would say, yeah, so that means I need to keep it. And you would say to me, if they can do it 80% as well, you have to let that be done, because then you can go and do new things. You can work on growth initiatives. You can do things that nobody else can even do 80% of. And it was like a reset of what done was, and of like all the little details that I could see. I had to be okay with, that's okay. 80% done can be done. And let me watch to see if it means that our client churn rate increases. Let me watch to see if it means that our deliverables get a lot more expensive because we're in lots of revisions. Like, did any of those business things happen? Because I was able to just say, fine, you're right, I don't have to touch it. Because that's where I think perfectionist and ego can really, and like just the need to be needed and being like, see, I knew I could do it better. Like, it's this accidental thing that you do. By you, I mean I.
Yeah. Yes.
By we, I mean.
If you're okay with, I believe I can do it better than other people, you have evidence that you're right about that. You can prove that. So why not just accept it? And the 80% tool is meant for you to accept that you are better, so that you can accept other people's standards of excellence of 80% as good as yours, and sort of hold your ego intact. Because the first step to applying that is, well, they're going to do the 80% and I'm going to put the final touches on the 20%. But at least I'm only doing 20% of the work. Later, it's what you just said. I got to let go of the 20% and say it's good. There's no return for it. It didn't matter. I was adding finesse to things that didn't matter.
Mm-hmm. Yes, looking for a place for my creative energy.
Yeah.
Hey there, podcast listeners. It is no exaggeration to say that the work my companies and I have done with Brian and his team at Lucian have been absolutely game-changing. I would not be where I am today without their experience and guidance. If you're struggling to grow your business, your profits, or grow your people, or maybe your business is growing, but it just isn't getting you personally to where you want to be, you have got to schedule time. Give Brian 1 hour of your life, and I promise that you will see the way forward a little bit more clearly. If you're interested in scheduling, there's a link in show notes. I promise it will help. Now, back to the show. Okay, so let's take a look at a version that I think could be related to this concept of perfectionism. And someone else added, how do I manage all the balls and not let stress overtake me to the point of breakdown? How do I climb back when I get kind of buried underneath all this stuff? All the stuff comes crashing down, all the stress overtakes me, and I feel like I don't know where to start. And, you hear people say the word overwhelmed a lot too. So how is this related to this concept of perfectionism, or what do we do when we're in that kind of space personally or professionally?
So language bears fruit in our actions. So you said try. That bears fruit in you're not accomplishing. Overwhelmed is a signal of I'm not taking action. It's another version of confused. So I'm overwhelmed right now typically means we stay there. So when it's I have all the balls in the air, it goes back to who told you you had to manage the balls? Who told you were responsible for all the balls? Who's holding you accountable? And a lot of times if you're a leader, the only person that told you that was you. So you're saying I have to hold all the balls. It goes back to command and control, and you're holding yourself to a higher standard. So first look to that. And then, well, why do I feel like I need to be the one to do that? And are the things that I am saying I have to juggle, are those the things that are actually important in my life or to my business or not?
I remember I would say a long list of stuff and you would be like, so just stop one of them. And I would be like, but you don't understand. And then you would kind of be like, yeah, but you're not doing all of them right now, right? So just pick which one is going to drop and plan for it. Fair?
Yes, because the fear of dropping something is that you find out later that it had meaning that it didn't have because you've been doing it a long time. So you've assigned a meaning, but if I drop it and nobody notices, then I've been wasting my time. Or if I drop it and it's a big deal, then I chose wrong. So there's a fear to, I got to cling to that because it's important. But that always comes from not setting priorities of what is important so you know what you're managing all that stuff too.
We need to stop on this because I remember in season of my own life when JR and I would start discussing something and he would ask me a hard question about anything. Like it probably wasn't even hard. It just seemed bigger than I had the capacity. And I would just kind of start getting teary and be like, I don't know. I just feel so overwhelmed. And it was like my response to everything when it started to get hard and not automatic was like, I don't know. I'm just so overwhelmed. And I recognize this is such, you just said this, it's a state of like, there's no inertia. You are in a reactive state when you are overwhelmed. I want to say that 40 times. You are in a reactive state when you are overwhelmed. And the world is not going to sort that out for you. It's like a you problem. I had to get to the place where I had to own, I am the only one making me feel overwhelmed. I want somebody else to fix that. I want somehow the conveyor belt of responsibility to slow. I want somebody to tell me what I should work on and what's not important. Like you don't say that stuff out loud, but like you're kind of waiting for somebody to come sort that out. I'm picturing like one of those silly dinner plates that you eat out of like the cafeteria, like what is a big compartment and what is a little compartment because you can't see it when you're just in it. So it is connected to not having your priorities clearly defined. So give examples. I have like some in my own head, but what do you mean when you say priorities? I feel like I know this because I've lived it. And once you start to get clear, it's like, no, this is actually the thing. Like, listen so hard to this. If you are overwhelmed, it is not a function of your time, actually.
No, it is in what your understanding of what time is. So if I am overwhelmed and you said it's reactive, that also means that you're making a choice. So the sick feeling is, you mean I'm choosing to be overwhelmed? Yes. And partially you need to be overwhelmed because if I'm overwhelmed, I don't have to take an action. Because a lot of times the actions are uncomfortable, or they require work, or they require effort, or they require you saying no to something else. And so I don't want to do that. So I'm going to claim and choose overwhelmed, and I'm going to live in that stress as a choice to deal with something else. Because the fix is very simple, is start the inertia. So if I'm overwhelmed by my storage closet because it's just got so much junk in it that I walk past it and I ignore it, the first thing that I should do is to pick one box. But if I'm overwhelmed, I'm not going to pick one box at all. Mm-hmm. So it's I don't want to deal with it because something's going to be hard. And so I'm going to choose that is a big mechanism.
Like, I find this, that people get so comfortable with their current state and they'll tell themselves that it becomes familiar. And so like overwhelmed is actually where they've accidentally chosen to live, like what you're saying. And I'll say things like, outsource your laundry. Like, just get rid of it. It's literally for like $30 a week. Just get rid of your laundry. And then they start protecting, like, well, they're not going to do it wrong. And what if something gets lost? And it's like all these protectionist vocabulary. I know those are my words, but how would you describe? It's like, why is that the reaction? It's worst case scenario.
All of a sudden, it's worst case scenario. The default is going to be worst case. If I give somebody else the laundry, then that means they're going to destroy it. Really? Their business is doing it 100% and yours is not. They're going to destroy your life. I think they might be able to do it better, but our brain just goes to, nope, it's bad.
So what does this look like in the professional capacity? We've used some home examples, like, the space is driving me crazy. I don't have time. And I'm like, just stop doing your laundry, please. But when business owners like me come to you, when sales leaders come to you and say, hey, we're stuck. We're in a place of no inertia. What's happening oftentimes? What does it sound like?
So what it sounds like is a lot of excuses. So if somebody goes, we just have a really hard time retaining clients. Okay, what's the reason? Well, our customer service team is terrible and the leader is not effective. Okay, why don't you hire a new one? Well, we can't because, and then it's all the, here's why we can't, here's why we can't, here's why we can't. So instead of dealing with the hard thing of, hey, maybe I need to replace that leader and fix the team, they live in this space of, well, we're trapped and we can't do anything about it. And there's so many ways that makes this wrong that we're just going to live in this because then we don't have to do the hard thing. Mm-hmm. And another would be, we're not getting enough business. And the cause of not getting business is you're not really pursuing business. You're just kind of going through the motions of hoping it shows up in some way, shape, or form. And so when you go, well, so what do you got to do to get it? It's like, yeah, but, it's hard right now. The environment's tough. The competitors are tough, Well, why don't you deal with that stuff? Mm-hmm. People don't want to deal with it because it's change, it's difficulty, it's effort, it's time, it's all those things. So it's easier to just say we can't.
I think when we were kind of doing some prep for this, you said all of this falls underneath this umbrella of I have to do it all. There's like a hero complex inside of that I can relate to. It feels very noble at face value, actually. But it's pretty poisonous when it plays out.
So if you have the mindset of I have to do it all and I have to be the one, what value are you placing on other people in your life? Because they're sitting around going, let me help you, let me participate, let me do this, let me provide resources, and when we say, hey, I got to do it all, who's going to mess with you? Who's going to tell you, no, you don't have to? Because that's going to be a blow to your ego because they're basically saying, hey, no, you don't have to. And you're like, no, I have to because you've self-assigned that. So you're negatively affecting people because you're not allowing them to bring value into your life. And you're building this wall so that nobody can give you that feedback to say, hey, you don't have to. It's okay. You don't have to be everything to everyone.
It makes me think when I went through my fear journey and I came up with this fear statement that helps me kind of orient to like my real purpose in life. My fear statement is I am for others. And I think in my whole life that's been true. But in my early career, it looked like this of I have to do it all, meaning I am for others in a way that means I want to try to make your life as easy as possible. I want to try to do the hard work so that you don't have to sweat and you don't have to work late and that you don't feel the weight of the stress of not having enough business or needing to lay people off. Like the way that I was for others was through this lens of I have to do it all. Even being for your kids, like I'm going to try to make your life comfortable, make sure all your stuff is done, get your laundry done, your lunch prep. Like I want to make your life easy is one interpretation, one way of living out I am for others. In this version of it, it's understanding that actually queuing up things that are hard to solve and giving people the runway to have the confidence and competence to be able to do that is actually my gift to them. It looks different. It's not about giving ease to everyone. It's about queuing up the resources, the runway, the environment for them to be able to grow. And I see that in my personal life with like my nanny. Like it has given her such a soft landing at this season in her life to be able to be in our house. She's got income that she can definitely rely on, like all these kinds of things. It's like she is helping me. She's part of my team. I don't have to do it all. And I'm creating an awesome opportunity for her. I look at that inside of the business. It's like a different color of the same underlying motive that allows for so much more scale in my life today.
But the motive was good. The motive is I want to serve others. I want to make it easier for them.
And I think that's what I want to try. This idea of I want to have to do it all is not always in this like maniacal, egotistical way. It can come from a place that actually is intended to serve and care for the people you love.
Yeah, but there's the unintended consequence of not seeing that through. You know, one of the things as you listed off, here's what I want to provide, is the most important one, which is I want to provide a place for safe failure so that people can grow and develop. But if I have to do it all and I have to protect them, failure is not an option. And I'm going to prevent their failure instead of allow it so that they do grow.
But that is a perspective shift, I think, that is important, especially as we think about this audience of like, I started to realize my job is to create scale in my time and my financial resources. And if I want to do that, mastering this idea of 80% completion, of perfectionism is not an outcome, and that overwhelm is a place of no inertia, that becomes like this. You remember that like Simon game where it was like green, green, red, red, that like that's what's coming to my mind, where it's like you have to be able to play that song so that you stay ahead of, I think, what can become really paralyzing mental patterns.
But you've also systematized your life. So it's one thing to play whack-a-mole. Like in the Simon game, that's your example. It's first red, then it's red, green. And once you know the pattern, you can keep up with it. And then it gets all of a sudden fast. And you're like, whoa, what happened? But you were good for a while because you knew what was coming. If you systematize things and you go, oh, I know that if I do this, it'll happen. But with a lot of people, they need permission to do that. Like if I'm a perfectionist, I don't know that I have permission to fail. I don't know that I have margin in my life that I can mess up or be vulnerable or any of those things because I'm just juggling the balls. You have permission. It's okay. And people around you want you to be okay with that.
The other story that's coming to mind for me when you talk about being comfortable, being vulnerable, and failing, I remember us fighting about when I was like trying to figure out what goals to set. And you were like, how many can you do? Well, how many calls to make, let's say in a week or something like that. And I was like, 12. You're like, so then it's 12. I was like, what do you mean it's 12? Like, how do you know that that's going to be the thing that I could this and elevate to this goal and this conversion and get to like $3 million of new business? Like, how do you know? I was sort of like just mad at you. He's like, I don't know. And I was like, well, then what the hell am I hiring you for? And you're like, if that's what you have the capacity to do, that's how we have to start. And then we'll start learning what that gets. And then if we want to calibrate your time or move something off, but like just start. And I was so stuck in like needing to know the answer to like 14 different numbers that were literally, there was no human way of getting the answer to those until I just behaved something. And I was like so annoyed that it was so simple to just start. And I think that's what you helped boil so many things down for me of like, I'm mad. That's all I know. I feel behind. It's not working. I'm mad because I'm scared. Let's be clear, right? And so you being like, this is a simple place to start so that you can begin getting some inertia towards where we're going. And that's how we're going to do this.
Yeah, because the mad was the overwhelmed, and the I just want the answers, which means I want the perfect answer, not the, well, I'm going to see how this goes answer. Yeah, and it's a high expectation that you put on yourself.
Yeah, because I needed to solve the whole problem. And you're like, you might not be able to.
Not all at once.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
So if you think about this year, we have the economy on the eve of recession almost all the time. We have high record inflation. We have interest rates going up. We have unemployment rising again. We have a presidential election looming with a lot of drama that's occurred along the way. And it is easy to take the position of all of this is outside of my control and there's nothing that I can do about it. And I'm going to throw up my arms and say, I'm overwhelmed. Or you could throw up your hands and say, I need to wait. I need to figure out. I need to come up with the plan. I need to do this, where you enter command and control. The important thing that you realize is that you are in a state of chaos that you are choosing to be in right now. Because in every one of those areas, there is an opportunity to take advantage of that because you're in that state, you are not seeing. And if you look through a different lens and take some inertia and say, hey, what if I did this? Or what if I took this step? Or what if I explored this? Or what if I did this? That you would actually find the progress to give you confidence to get through the rest of it.
I always love these conversations with Brian because I feel like I go from looking through a microscope to like a wide angle lens where suddenly I have courage to be able to start. And I have confidence of like one thing that I can do to start getting me from a place of like reactive state of existing. Because as a leader, I always feel like I might not know the perfect place to start moving, but if I start moving, my people can draft behind me. And if you are feeling yourself stuck right now in this perfectionist state or in overwhelmed, I hope that this conversation has given you somewhere to start, because living in a still reactive place is no place to live life. And if you're unsure of where you're at right now, like after this conversation of where to take that step forward, please give Brian a call. Like literally, this is how I spent a decade of my life, growing my business, growing my own capacity, is by having the courage to ask the scariest question out loud and being willing to have my perspective challenged with a wide angle lens instead of the microscope that I was looking through. Thank you for joining me on another episode of Scared Confident. Until next time, keep telling fear, you will not decide what happens in my life. I will.